to Senator Wu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. And for Professor Moret, you make the case that there should be a more systematic and rigorous evaluation of sanctions, particularly given that the West is talking its sanctions to be more comprehensive and severe and so on. In our hearings, we've learned that the three principal reasons for sanctions are, first of all, to change behavior, secondly, to deter bad acts that may follow, and the third is to punish. So the first part of my question is whether you agree that these are the three metrics which we should use to measure the effect and success of sanctions. And then we learned that there's a fourth criteria for imposing sanctions, and that is that we do it because we don't want to be offside with the principal sanctioner, typically the United States, or more broadly with our allies. Should that also be a criteria to measure the success of sanctions?
Yes, thank you, Senator. That's an excellent question, and I think it's very much on our minds as sanctions specialists as well, because for many decades there have been attempts to assess impacts using a variety of different methods, and of course it's extremely difficult to demonstrate causality as opposed to correlation in many instances. And of course it's also a topic that can be exploited for political ends. It's the focus of a great deal of disinformation and propaganda, particularly by targeted countries and governments as well. So having said that, I think there are some excellent tools out there that allow us to think about assessing impacts. I already mentioned the UN Sanctions app, and that actually bases the three categories of signaling. So showing whether it's, if we take the case of Russia, the sanctions are used to signal to the Ukrainian people that we're in solidarity with their struggle. It can be a strong signal to Russia and to other would-be detractors who attempted to do something similar, that the international community does not accept this behavior. It can also be very important to signal to domestic audiences that something is being done. And so there's even some subcategories there, I think. And then this is my good colleague Francesco Giumelli who termed these back in around a decade ago. The other two categories that the sanctions app uses are coerce a change in behavior, and constrain access to resources. And I think that's a really important one, because if we take the Russia example again, the sanctions that can limit access to whether it's internet platforms or vital financial resources or weapons systems or dual use goods, they all play a role in slowing down the war effort in Russia. So I think it's really important to keep this very nuanced understanding. And I think you're right there that the influence over allies is one that is often overlooked, but it's a really important one. Some would debate whether the punishing side should be an aim or an objective of sanctions. Most sanctioning powers or actors would claim that their sanctions are not intended to punish. But I think if we look again at the case of Russia, there does seem to be the very strong punitive function there. And I think it's really important when we're thinking of assessing the sanctions that we disaggregate the idea that economic pain is a measure of success. If we're thinking about punishing a target, then yes, it is. But it doesn't mean that we are any more likely to reach stated policy aims of the sanctions if there is a strong degree of economic pain. So I think there needs to be an understanding that economic damage is not necessarily the same as bringing about political change on the ground. Thanks.
You have another minute, Senator Wu.
Well, quickly then for Professor Herman, in what category of sanctions would you place the American prohibition of advanced semiconductor chips to China? And what basis in international law or international thinking about sanctions does that action fit into?
It fits into national security, which is untroubled by WTO and international discipline. National security in the U.S. context tops every other issue. And national security vis-a-vis China is top of mind in Washington. You just have to talk to some people in the U.S. Congress. You'll find that out very quickly, Senator.